Voters in the United Kingdom have been casting their ballots to choose a party to lead the country. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announced snap elections in May. Voters in 650 constituencies across the UK will elect members of parliament to the lower chamber and House of Commons. A party needs to win at least 50% or more to secure a majority in the House of Commons and be asked to form a government by King Charles III. Well, let's get an update with Voice of America's Henry Ridgell, who joins us live from London. A very good evening to you, Henry. Thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it. What can you say about the turnout today?
We won't know the exact turnout until some point tomorrow, of course, when all those ballots are counted. There are some 46 million eligible voters in the UK, and we expect some kind of result to come through in the early hours of tomorrow morning UK time. The polls close, as you said, at 10 o'clock local time in around 2.5 hours' time. And that's when we'll get a gauge of the result. We'll get the first what's known as exit poll, which are carefully scientifically constructed surveys of voters leaving specific polling stations across the country. That is then expanded to give a national result, which on past evidence has been pretty accurate. Now, on turnout, the figure in 2019 was 67%. So not overwhelming. Will voters be more animated this time around, be more determined to vote for a particular party, or perhaps change the Conservative government? We don't know yet. We'll find out in the coming hours.
Now, apparently, well, certainly from reports, looks like thousands were left unable to cast their votes due to postal ballot delays.
Yes, there have been two controversies in this election, I think, already before we have the result. Now, there have been thousands, possibly tens of thousands of cases where postal ballots have been delayed arriving at the home addresses. I can say myself, my postal ballot only arrived yesterday, a day before the election, and that presumably wouldn't have given enough time to get it back to the relevant polling stations to send it back in time to be counted. Now, this is something that seems to have happened in different constituencies up and down the country, and some have just not arrived at all. Now, one Conservative former minister, Kemi Badenoch, has tweeted about this in the last few hours. She is in a very tight constituency herself against the Labour Party, and she has raised the issue and said that several thousand of her constituents were missing their postal vote, and this could impact the result. So perhaps putting a marker out there before the result is even known. The second controversy is around photo ID. This is the first election where voters have had to have some form of official photographic ID, a passport or a driving license, a bus pass for the elderly. And we believe that many thousands have been turned away because they didn't know that, they weren't expecting it. And critics say this disproportionately affects the young and the poor, who are less likely to have those forms of ID that are accepted.
On the first controversy, has Royal Mail explained what may have happened?
Not yet, and I don't think they would say the responsibility necessarily lies with them. Some of those who are affected by this say the problem lies with the local councils themselves at the local government level, who are responsible for sending out the ballots in good time. Certainly that is what Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative minister, was getting at in her tweet, accusing her local council of being hopeless at getting the ballots there on time. But I think certainly there will be some kind of inquest into what has happened and whether this will have a big impact on the result. But given the scale of the possible victory that polls indicate, I would be surprised as to whether there will be any doubt about the result, that the postal ballots could have changed this. But within individual constituencies, it's certainly possible.
Now, there's been a lot of speculation, reports, and analysis of the situation in the UK, with a lot of people suggesting that incumbent and Conservative Party leader, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, may just lose this one. And we could see a Labour government for the first time in about 14 years.
That's right, and that's why some people are calling this an historic election on the scale of 1997, when Tony Blair came to power, or indeed in the 1960s, when the Labour government ended a series of Tory victories, or even 1945, when Churchill, after winning the Second World War, was booted out of power when Labour came to power. It's of that scale, and the reason being that the polls indicate a landslide of unprecedented proportions for the Labour Party. The latest poll, the last one to have taken place just before the election, which was published yesterday, gave Labour a 212-seat majority, a majority they've never enjoyed before, and the Conservatives on only just over 100 seats, which would be their worst performance ever. And so that would obviously give Labour a huge mandate to push through its policies and the ease with which to do it with such a big majority. It would also, I think, cause the Conservative Party to obviously have a look at itself and might even pose an existential threat for the party itself if its vote was that low. It would have to look back at the last 14 years and see how it has hemorrhaged that support from a high in 2019, just 5 years ago under Boris Johnson, where they had a majority of just under 100, to where the polls predict where Labour has a majority of 212. There will be a big inquest by the Conservatives and by the country over the past 14 years. And I think it points to the instability that took hold really with the Brexit vote, with the referendum for Britain leaving the European Union that was held in 2016. And as we all know, Britons voted to leave, and that forced the resignation of David Cameron at that point, who up till then had been a popular and powerful Prime Minister with a majority himself. And then after that, of course, we had Theresa May, who failed to get her Brexit policy through and resigned. We had Boris Johnson, who was riding high until the revelations about parties in Downing Street during the coronavirus lockdown. Liz Truss, whose premiership only lasted a month before the markets crashed, forcing her from office. And now the incumbent Rishi Sunak, who has really seemingly failed to inspire not only the broader electorate, but his own party. You know, there are prominent figures within the party calling for him to resign, and they have been doing so for several months before the election. So this is a party, I think, that senses that it is in the death throes of its current guise, if you like, and that it will have to reform itself after the election if the scale of the loss it matches the polls. And, you know, there are plenty of new leaders waiting in the wings, probably to take the party in a different direction, possibly as we've seen in the United States with the Republican Party under Donald Trump, with its leap towards the right wing. We may see a similar phenomenon in the UK.
Henry Ridgewell, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Good to be with you. Thanks.
He is, of course, with the Voice of America.